Chapter 14. The psychology of man's genesis and appearance in the world. In regard to this question, I have to say right off that according to Anastasia's information, the process of conception and carrying a child, as well as its appearance in the world as a man, capital M, is not primarily a physiological, but a psychological one. It is the highest form of joint creation between a man and a woman. It is the apex of achievement of their thoughts, feelings, and intellect. Initially, such an affirmation met with some skepticism on my part, as indeed, I think, on the part of many of my readers. So I shall reproduce here my more detailed dialogue with her on this topic. Anastasia, how can you say that it is mainly psychological? After all, it's a real material fetus that develops in the mother's womb. The woman experiences actual physiological sensations, sometimes even painful ones. There have been lots of popular scientific books written on the subject of carrying a child and its appearance in the world. And these often go into great detail about what a pregnant woman should do and how she should act on a physiological level. When you come right down to it, physiology is primary after all. Yes, sadly, such an opinion has indeed been thoroughly rooted in human society. It means that the principal component of the human self has either been relegated to the background or eliminated completely. The result is that people have come into the world who are, in essence, quite the opposite of God's likeness. Think about it, Vladimir. The fetus in the mother's womb lives and develops, not because someone has written a bunch of treatises on the subject, but because this was the original thought of the Creator, indeed, of nature. To interfere with this eminently perfect process is tantamount to replacing what is natural and perfect by something that is artificial and less than perfect. The physiology involved in the formation of human flesh was pre-programmed by the Creator and is quite capable of developing all by itself, without bothering the mother or father with a need to control this process. On the other hand, the psychology and philosophy of birth, a process on an immeasurably higher level, is wholly dependent on the mother and father. It is a joint creation by man, with capital M, and God. The appearance of pain at the moment of birth is a sign of an erroneous psychological approach to the birth process on the part of the parents. Many, many animals give birth to their offspring in natural surroundings, and none of them perish or experience suffering. Nor did the Creator come up with any thought of pain for his most beloved creation, man, meaning all of mankind. Just as loving parents would never conjure up the thought of pain for their children. As she fulfills her highest purpose, that of co-creating God's man, the woman who has carried the divine child within herself receives a reward ordained by the Creator. This reward is the feeling of bliss and the chain of joyful ecstasies during labor, but certainly not pain. Quite to the contrary, the process of giving birth to a man should be a joyful and pleasant one. It is man himself, deceived by the occult sciences and suggestions from the dark side, who by his own intrusion has made childbirth painful for the mother and a fatal shock for the baby. What's this about a shock, Anastasia? A shock fatal for the baby at that? The baby just gets born. Yes, it gets born, but it does not understand why it is being so rudely torn out of its pleasant and perfect space, and why its mother suffers and experiences pain. The mother's pain occasions untold mourning on the part of the child. What, is it possible for a mother to give birth without any pain at all? Not only is it possible without pain, but with a supreme and most pleasing joy and delight. You know, Anastasia, our modern medicine is equipped to do just that. It can guarantee an almost painless childbirth with the help of anesthetics. Anesthetics can lessen the mother's physical pain, Vladimir, but they increase the mental pain for the infant, since anesthetics cut him off from contact with his mother. Such a state instills in him fear and a lack of self-confidence, which continue even into adulthood, even into his most advanced years. They prevent him from being born again. But why does something like that happen? When a man is living in his mother's womb, he feels coziness there. He feels comforted, cared for, peaceful. On the physical plane, his needs are completely met. He is free of problems plaguing man in everyday life. He is allowed to experience the whole order of the universe. Over the 9 months, all the information about the marvelous order of the universe, about man's purpose right from the beginning of creation, is imparted to him. The world he knows inside his mother's womb is vast and marvelous. Then all of a sudden, something rudely tries to thrust him out of this world of supreme grace. Every woman knows this means the labor has begun, an inevitability, or so it seems, and hence people do not think about the effect it might have on the infant. Few women in today's world realize that they do not have to frighten their baby. On the contrary, they can caress their child during labor, talk with them, express their thoughts to them, invite them to be born into the world. And this need not be accompanied by any sensation of stress or pain. After hearing the call of his mother and father, the child will perceive the labor contractions as a caress, as an invitation to make his appearance of his own free will, to explore a world that is brand new to him. To be born of his own free will, that is an indication of great and extraordinary significance. All the information imparted by God during a birth like this will be preserved in him. When the woman experiences fear over her labor, this fear is felt by the child in the womb. When the woman experiences pain from her labor trouble and has thoughts only for herself, the child in the womb experiences double the amount of pain. He feels abandoned and above all helpless and defenseless. Such feelings are harmful and they are lasting. They wipe out the information the child has earlier received about grand creation, since they are in contradiction to it. In this kind of birth, the child feels for the first time in his life that he is not the master of the universe, but a worthless non-entity, subject to some kind of external forces. His body is born, but the spirit of mastery and a kind of creator is not born in him. Such a man will not become the likeness of the divine. A mere slave of some other entity he will remain, and he will try his whole lifetime to free himself from slavery, but in vain. Earthly czars, presidents, along with their bodyguards and service staff, are likewise the slaves of circumstance. They think that they are deciding something of importance and try to make their life a happy one. But life for them only becomes more and more unhappy and hopeless, like the ever deeper blackening of both the air and the water. This thought of hopelessness, suggested at the time of birth by pain, interferes with the human society's ability to make the right decisions. Yes, Anastasia, a birth like that presents a very scary picture. Maybe that's why some women today opt for a C-section. That would prevent something like that from happening, eh? It still happens. One could hardly explain such a procedure as the birth of a man. It is more like a routine operation. Who is thereby causing the man to emerge into the world? The mother, who has not given birth to the child, or the surgeon, who has torn the fetus out of the mother's body? The infant, who has not yet appeared in the world, suddenly loses contact with his mother and, consequently, with the whole order of grand creation. Then he is forcibly torn from the womb. What for? Where to? And why so rudely? And why is he not in charge of anything himself? The entire world crashes before him. People believe a child is born into the world while he, at the moment of birth, himself feels forlorn. I'm going to read that again. People believe a child is born into the world while he, at the moment of birth, feels himself forlorn. And while it seems as though this infant man has thrived, what has remained alive, in fact, is only his flesh. He will try to use what paltry remains he can reclaim of his spiritual substance to search for his divine self throughout his life. And for this, only his father and mother are to blame. Anastasia, as I understand it, it is on the women and on the way they carry and birth their children that the whole future of their offspring, not to mention the future of human civilization, depends. Is that true? Yes, it is true, Vladimir, but no less. In fact, in equal measure, does human birth depend on the men, on the fathers. Hold on there, Anastasia. Explain what you mean when you say a man brings a child into the world. After all, men cannot actually give birth. They are physically incapable of giving birth. There is a trap hidden in there, you see, Vladimir. In accepting the suggestion that birth is mainly a physiological procedure, the majority of people have thereby excluded the Great Spirit, the Father Creator, from the birth process. More specifically, they have excluded God the Father from the birthing mother's labor. It was God's absence that first got reflected in the woman in the form of labor pains, and subsequently of general human suffering. Can you explain in more detail the man's role in the labor? And why is excluding him tantamount to excluding God? Should the father or the man attend to his wife's labor? It is quite unnecessary for the man to attend to the labor. It is sufficient for him to be by her side, but that is not the father's main purpose. But what then is his main purpose? To comprehend that, you must realize that the mother's womb nourishes the flesh of the fetus conceived in her from her beloved male partner. It feeds the flesh, and that is most important, and that is important indeed, but it is not the most important factor. The fetus reacts to the condition and feelings not only of the mother, but in equal measure to those of the father. When a husband talks with his pregnant wife, the fetus conceived does not understand the parent's words. It does not really comprehend the meaning of words uttered to their full extent. But the fetus acutely perceives the feelings of the parents. Sometimes a man is led by an impulse of tender feelings to caress his pregnant wife's tummy or put his ear to it and hear the baby's movements. Caresses like that are pleasing to the woman, but the fetus inside her, it would seem, does not perceive them physically, but it feels them on an immeasurably greater level. The feelings of the baby's mother and father come to him in a flood. He receives them with great joy, with supreme bliss. On the level of feelings, the fetus takes account of thoughts as well. When parents wait for their child in love and harmony and keep thinking about him, then from the very moment of conception, he constantly dwells in the father's and the mother's energy field, and this is very pleasing to him. It is through the mother's and father's feelings that the child feels the surrounding world outside his mother's womb. If a father at his pregnant wife's side hears and exults in the song of a nightingale, the fetus in the mother's womb will feel both the song and the father's joy. After he is born and grows up, he will continue to delight in the nightingale's song, just as he did in the womb. If the father or mother suddenly takes fright upon beholding a serpent, the child once born will be frightened at the same sight too. In the womb, of course, he could not actually see the serpent, but through what his parents see, the information about it will be stored in his subconscious throughout his life. When a father, Vladimir, skillfully sings songs to his pregnant wife, their infant will sing no worse than his father as he grows up. If a father starts contemplating the stars in his mind, their offspring, after birth, will show an interest in the stars. I have also heard, Anastasia, of how a certain composer played the piano for his pregnant wife, repeating over and over again a tune that he had composed which had caught his wife's fancy. But later the composer divorced his wife before the birth of their son. When the child had grown a bit, his mother put him in music school, and one day she heard him performing his father's tune. The amazed mother decided that her son had somewhere discovered an old musical store, since this tune had never been performed in any concert, and the score had never been published. But upon entering the piano room, she saw that he was playing without any score at all. She asked her son, "Who taught you to play this piece, son?" "Nobody," the boy replied. "I just heard it somewhere, but I can't remember where." I like it. What about you, Mama? I like it too. Very much, replied the woman, and asked her son how he could have memorized it, since in school he had never started playing new works right off, even from a score. No, never right away, but this one took hardly any time at all to learn by heart, for some reason. It just seems to be inside me. I want to continue it and add to it in the same key. The boy continued to develop his father's melody, which he had heard in his mother's womb. Like his father, he too eventually became a composer. Footnote. A very similar experience is recounted by Boris Brott, former conductor of the Hamilton Symphony Orchestra in Ontario, Canada, who as a young musician found himself able to play certain pieces sight unseen. It turned out that these were pieces by his mother, a professional cellist, who had played these during her pregnancy. His experience is cited by Toronto psychiatrist Thomas Verney in his book, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, which, by the way, is a very good book. That is a good example that you cited, Vladimir, and it is by no means the only one. Many examples point to the fact that child raising effectively begins right from the mother's womb, and even a little bit earlier, before the conception even takes place. What do you mean earlier? Prior to conception, after all, there isn't anybody there yet. Remember you were telling me about telogyny, Vladimir, about how a child born to a woman may resemble the first man in her life, rather than the father with whom the marital conception took place. This very phenomenon attests to the fact that someone who is not yet conceived, but just waiting his turn in the conception queue, can read information about the father. Is there really such a thing as a conception queue? There is. Just as soon as intimacy occurs between a man and a woman, a spirit is born in space, ready for a material embodiment. What? Even if they're just having sex for fun, without any thought of childbearing? The spirit appears whenever the man experiences satisfaction. You mean orgasm? I do not like that word, Vladimir. It implies information which gives a false impression of the essence of the act. Okay, let's just call it satisfaction, but is there any way you can prove the existence of this spirit? You yourself can find the proof, Vladimir, if you wish. After all, one person may grasp the essence of this phenomenon from just a few words spoken, while another may require years, even after being presented with a multitude of examples, and then, even then, may still be reluctant to understand. Well, can modern science offer at least indirect proofs of what you're saying? Of course. What kind of science? Biology? Genetics? To tell the truth, I need to know so that I can more easily search for proofs. You will easily be able to find them in physics, Vladimir. In physics? What do physics have to do with it? You were talking about the spiritual. Maybe I should try esoterics, but physics? In physics, there is a law of conservation of energy. Okay, and what's that law got to do with it? During intimacy with a woman, an unusually powerful energy builds up inside the man, and the moment comes when he releases it. According to the law of conservation of energy, it cannot simply disappear without a trace, but is capable of mutating from one state into another. In the situation we are talking about, it is precisely the man's colossal energy and the lightning speed at which it is released that forms a spirit. Footnote: one of the most prominent scientists to study energy released during orgasm from the physical standpoint was the Austrian-American psychiatrist Wilhelm Reich, 1897 to 1957. He named this universal life force orgone, from orgasm, and was even able to build working apparatuses capable of accumulating it and using it for therapy. In 1956, he was arrested and thrown into prison, where he died the following year. His orgone accumulators were destroyed by the U.S. government, and his books were burnt, including his monumental work, The Function of the Orgasm, Discovery of the Orgone. Wow. Yes, I can agree with that, but at the same time, it's sad. How many spirits have men formed that they haven't obtained a material embodiment? I can think of a guy who has formed millions. Anyway, they probably number many times more than the population of the earth. Yes, many times more. Do they suffer, or do they just stay as senseless energy? They have feelings. Their suffering is monumental. What about the spirits that are conceived? Do they begin right off to feel their parents? Yes, right away. They feel their father and their mother in equal measure. Over the 9 months in the mother's womb, the parents can teach the living child a great deal. Such lessons need no repetition. The child will instantly memorize with lifelong retention any information imparted by his parents. A father who possesses a thorough knowledge can carry, or shape, as it were, his child's spiritual and intellectual self. It is the father in particular who is responsible for the higher level components of man with a capital M. And in this, his role is indeed godlike in nature. It is the father who gives birth to the man's spiritual component. Fathers should spend the whole gestation period compiling the program which shapes the spirit, the character, and the intellect of the future man with a capital M. You're talking, Anastasia, in terms of a program of a father who has a thorough knowledge of the procedure of raising a child still in the mother's womb? I am not talking about the father raising his child. I am talking about giving birth. A father does not do any raising, per se, but simply gives birth to the second, non-material self of his future son or daughter. I would say that we don't have any concept of that at all in our society. Our loss, no doubt. It is considered that the principal role of the father in a child's birth is finished after conception. Thereafter, in the best case scenario, the father helps his pregnant wife with household tasks and makes sure that all her needs are met. Unfortunately, that is too often true. But Anastasia, who then forms the man's main spiritual component if the father doesn't understand his role in this? Either circumstances or someone who knows about it and uses it to forward his own agenda. So it turns out that the men who are ignorant of the possibility of full participation in the formation of their future child right from conception are not raising their children in the fullest sense of the word. Unfortunately, Vladimir, that indeed happens all too often. It seems I have only just begun to understand the significance of what Anastasia has said, which in turn has showed me the whole absurdity of our way of life. It may be that all of our social upheavals are the result of the fact that that the overwhelming majority of us, even when we are together with our children, have little in the way of a relationship to them in practice. We abandon them to the whim of fate, hand them over to somebody else. But at that moment, I was having my conversation with Anastasia on the subject. It was not societal, but rather personal circumstances that were calling forth sad feelings in me. Hopelessly sad, perhaps. Feelings that will remain with me my whole life. I didn't even feel like continuing the conversation. You have gone pale, Vladimir, Anastasia observed, noticing my condition. Your eyes have dimmed. Why? I have no strength left to talk about it, Anastasia. I have a good idea of what has happened to you. But you will feel better if you can describe the cause of your unhappiness on your own. What is there to describe? It's perfectly obvious. When I realized the importance of the information you gave me about childbirth, it made me realize, too, that I had not participated sufficiently in the birth of my own daughter, Polina. But back then, neither my wife nor I had any idea of how we should relate to the question of childbirth. But you, Anastasia, had knowledge of this information. You bore a son and a daughter, and I, it turns out, am once more on the sidelines. You knew this, and still you didn't tell me in time what a father is supposed to do. Not only that, but I remember you telling me that I shouldn't see my son at all for some time, even after his appearance in the world. What did you do that for? Yes, I did say that to you, Vladimir. But think about it yourself. What would you have begun to teach your son if you had stayed the 9 months with me in the taiga? Do you want me to give you a hint as to the answer? Go ahead. You remember you asked me at that time to leave my family glade in the taiga, my space of love, which my parents had formed for me. You wanted me to give birth in a city, in a hospital. Then you said we had to send our son to kindergarten and the best schools, that you would make him into a businessman and that he would carry on your business. Yes, I did say that. But there was a lot I didn't know back then. Afterward, I finally accepted that you would never be able to, or never want to, live in the city, but still, you did not invite me to stay here with you in the taiga. If I had suggested it, would you have stayed? I don't know, but quite possibly I would have. And what would you have done? Like anyone else, I would have found some man's work to do around the home. But you should know, Vladimir, that I do not need any physical assistance. Everything here is all ready for willing service. The air, the water, the beasts, the grass. I asked about your activities in the hopes of finding out the most important thing, namely, where would your thoughts have been while awaiting the arrival of our son? So you have nothing to say. After all, your thoughts were just like your words back then. And you might have regretted that you did not succeed in persuading me to leave the city. You even had a plan in mind of taking me by force to give birth in a hospital. Yes? Admit it. Well, yes, but it didn't last very long. Now tell me, Vladimir, just how was our son supposed to react to such thoughts coming from his father? Such aggressive thoughts, besides. Yes, I see now. It would not have been very good for him. And still, I'm sad that now Any case, it turns out that I'm not a fully fledged father. And that means that you bore a son and a daughter too, who are not completely man. With a capital M. Trust me, Vladimir, and don't be upset. And don't be sad. You are a fully fledged father to our children, and our children have received everything in full measure. It turns out that our son is even a little overloaded with information and sensitivity. At one point, my great-grandfather Moise was not able to restrain himself and told him more than he should have. But how so? I was not with you during your pregnancy. I didn't compile any program. I wasn't present at the birth. I did not invite my children to be born, and yet you say that I've come out a fully fledged father? A moment ago you were arguing quite the opposite.